The fourth wave of Zen. Big evolutionary transformations must be done in stages, preserving the organism's viability while it is changing. But sometimes there is a kind of leap as the first fish struggles onto land and somehow survives. Millions of times over, millions of times over, this must have happened with few survivors. But those survivors somehow made it, began to evolve limbs in place of fins, lungs in place of gills. Of the myriad small sanghas struggling to adapt Zen to a new culture, a new language, and new people with different ways of thinking, some inevitably perish. But the viability of the Dharma enables some small fraction of them to adapt and thrive. Appamada is probably part of the fourth wave of this evolution. The first wave, as I see it, came in the 1800s when New England's transcendentalists were introduced to Eastern philosophy, including Hinduism and Buddhism. In 1844, the Transcendentalist journal, The Dial, published the first English translation of the Lotus Sutra. In 1893, the Parliament of Religions opened in Chicago, featuring representatives of a variety of world religions and a number of Buddhist schools. Zen Buddhism was represented by Soyen Shaku, traveling from Japan and considered the first American ancestor of Zen. Kim?
As Wikipedia relates it, in 1893, Soyen Shaku was invited to speak at the World Parliament of Religion held in Chicago. He made the trip to what was then considered the barbaric United States, although his associates discouraged him from attending. In 1905, a wealthy American couple invited Shaku to stay in the United States. For 9 months, he lived near San Francisco, where he established a small zendo in the home of Alexander and Ida Russell and gave regular Zazen lessons. Shaku became the first Zen Buddhist priest to teach in North America.
That was the beginning of Zen in the West. This first wave then was when mostly Japanese Zen teachers arrived in the United States, originally to serve the Japanese immigration communities here.
The second wave followed World War II in the 1950s, when beat poets, artists, and writers, including Jack Kerouac, Gary Snyder, and Allen Ginsberg, took a serious interest in Zen. In the 1960s, Shunryu Suzuki established the San Francisco Zen Center, SFZC, and Taizan Maizumi, the Zen Center of Los Angeles, ZCLA, attracting many followers and popularizing Zen, both as a meditation practice and as an aesthetic of minimalism, simplicity, and beauty. The quirky spontaneity and humor of Zen masters and their puzzling koans captivated Americans.
Okay. And there's a nice picture of 2011 Lay Zen Teachers Association. Let's see. The third wave, in my view, was the radical step of Japanese teachers ordaining Westerners and women as priests and even ultimately conferring Dharma transmission in the West, certainly an unorthodox step. Zen centers began to establish themselves with Western Zen teachers, many of whom had never been to Japan. These third wave centers still faithfully followed or aspired to the traditional Japanese Zen and Chinese Chan models to the extent that they were able to. I feel the fourth wave, this wave, sees the arising of new forms, practices, and models for Western Sanghas led by Western Zen teachers.
It is a time of widespread experimentation with technology, psychotropic drugs, biofeedback, and artificial intelligence. Unfortunately, many of these experiments seem to be chasing the individualistic dream of having exceptional experiences or transforming personal consciousness a manifestation, again, of some individual projects of self-improvement, superior being, or personal satisfaction. Chogyam Trungpa described this impulse as spiritual materialism. It plays well with the overall consumerism and a certain narcissism in the culture.
But among these various exploits, there is a movement of sanghas like ours, dedicated to building spiritual community and fostering spiritual relationships. The fourth wave is marked by its diversity and by the inclusion of women on equal terms, certainly rare in the Chinese and Japanese Zen tradition. It seems to me that our Western contributions to Zen includes a valuing of diversity and the development of strong women teachers and leaders.
The Liaison Teachers Association was established in 2010 to support these contemporary teachers and their Sangha through sharing information, effective practices, and innovations. It also provides a network of spiritual peers for Sangha leaders evolving new models of Zen community. Learn more at lzta.org.
Do we take a peek at the chart?
I think probably we want this first paragraph before we do that, because it sort of introduces what this chart is about.
Okay. Stages of evolution. Can we identify any stages or levels in the evolution of a Sangha? One useful way to think about evolution in social systems is with Claire Graves' bio-psychosocial model of human development, popularly known as spiral dynamics, spiraldynamics.org. In his path-breaking research over 30 years and thousands of subjects, Graves came to understand that our development, individually and socially, takes the form of a double helix. This, which is so cool. This spiral includes two strands, the existential life conditions we face and our inner potential, including our physical, psychological, and social capacities. Development unfolds in stages characterized by specific ways we organize our values, and therefore our thoughts, words, and actions. You can read more about spiral dynamics, this framework for understanding evolutionary stages in individuals and societies, and the values they hold in the book, The Never-Ending Quest by Claire Graves, Chris Cowan, and Natasha Todorovic, available at the website and here in the Tributaries chapter. So here is the chart.
It's a kind of, you can see the two strands of the double helix, one on each side.
Peg, being stuck in trauma, could you put that anywhere?
Yeah, you would be stuck at one of these levels. So the trauma of red level is a kind of physical violence or shaming or being subdued and suppressed and oppressed. That's at red level. At blue level, it has to do with your sense of being either in or out. So the trauma might be exclusion from a blue level system, which is a system of authority based on hierarchy and rules. So you'd be outcast or excommunicated or court-martialed out of a blue level system, and that would create the trauma. So it's dependent. Trauma would show up differently depending on which level of development.
But it would keep you from moving on.
Well, yeah, we'll see you'll see that when we get to the change state indicators. So he also studied how change happens from one level to the next, and so it's kind of interesting because certain factors have to be in place in order for change to be possible from one level to another level. So So yeah, so it's a kind of this is a developmental sequence, goes one way. Although you can fall back into a previous level if the life conditions require it. So, for example, when the hurricane hit New Orleans, everybody was plunged back into beige level existence. How do you get food? How do you get shelter? Just like being like a mammal, you know. Um, so, but because that these are it's a transcend and include model, they have that capacity within them. And the minute the life conditions change, they can return to their previous level. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
So you might find yourself, you might be maybe your values might be organized in a green level way, and you might find that you have to take a job in a blue level corporation. You know how to do that. You know how to follow the rules. You know how to, send out the memos. You know how to do all the things that are required in a blue level organization. It won't be your happiest fit, but you'll be able to do it. But somebody from red level would not be able to do it at all. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's how we hold our values. It's not the values themselves. So anybody at any one of these levels could tell you that their primary value is their family, for example. But the way it's held, if your values are organized in a purple level way versus a red level way or a blue level way, are very different families. Very different.
And it's interesting that it always seems to start out with some level of dichotomy or bipolar or whatever types of scenarios. It never seems to start at a unified singularity.
Well, you're always engaging the environment. So the struggle is always to fit the environment in a way that you can thrive. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about what the nature of the environment actually is. It causes people to have maladapted responses. They're just not they're not recognizing or they're not capable of meeting the life conditions that actually exist. So they struggle because they're trying to use strategies from a different level for a particular set of life conditions
Mm.
that don't fit. So yeah, so it's a kind of evolutionary model in that it's developmental. You want
Seems it would make education very difficult because you're dealing with people at all different levels.
Well, it depends. Yeah, we talked a lot about this when I was running the writing center about recognizing the levels that students were coming in at and what they thought the world was composed of, so how they viewed the world. Because the university was a certain kind of environment. You try to create a classroom where learning is inevitable, that it can't really be avoided. And and yet people will still map onto it their expectations of an entirely different set of life conditions. And so, yeah, so it's challenging for teachers. Once you recognize that someone is working from a certain set of values, it's actually pretty easy to talk to them if you are at least at that level, because you recognize that what's going to be key for them. So key for someone with blue level thinking is, are they following the rules? Do they belong to this particular structure? Are they Navy SEALs? Are they IBM folks? Are they, or are they not? So it's very binary. And it's very different. Orange level thinking is really all about metrics for success. How do you create and innovate and make new products and make new things? So it's different. So the question is, how are you demonstrating your success? How are you demonstrating your capacities? So yeah, so it's very challenging for educators, I think, because typically the band of students that you see will typically be generationally at a little mix of levels. So when I started teaching, they were at blue level and orange level. They were coming out of blue level systems, high schools, and they were being challenged. They were supposed to succeed in life. They were supposed to be a success. They were supposed to somehow prove themselves. And so they were basically blue and orange level. We started to see some green level folks then who really had this sense of community and bonding and connection. And so in every generation, there's some of each, but there's a kind of bell curve. And so the bell curve for orange kind of topped out and green started showing up. And then we started seeing some students at yellow level. And these were students who they didn't follow any of the previous norms. And so a lot of teachers were baffled by them. They felt they could be learning anywhere. They could be in Ecuador. They were very much about flexibility and flow. And they like to work in spontaneous, put together teams of their own choosing. Everything for them was really about this flow state and freedom. And it was really, really hard for, let's say, blue level teachers to deal with that. Like, can I turn in my paper as a film instead of a paper? Can I, like it was, well, if you don't recognize what you're dealing with, you struggle, because they're not conforming to what your expectations are.
I guess I was lucky that I didn't have blue teachers.
Well, yeah, it's very interesting. Some kids do much better with a lot of structure, with the blue level environment is good for them because they aren't regulated. They don't have internal regulation yet. And so the external structure helps them. And this is why they take kids out of the inner city and put them into boot camp in the military. They give them a really, really solid structure. And that actually helps them. They have to make their bed. They have to take a shower. And these things have to happen at expected times. And that they come out of dysregulated environments. So, and they don't have any internal regulation. So that's the way the military instills that. And it's a supportive structure for people who are coming out of, let's say, a red level environment, where it's, dog eat dog world. And they find stability and safety and security in that. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah. Anyway.
Thank you.
Off on a tangent, but this is, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll read this at the bottom.
What are you going to read?
This is a transcend and include model. Each level can assess its earlier levels if life conditions require it, but it is unable to perceive and understand the levels beyond itself. Color codes are introduced later. Were introduced later. Note that there may be a misfit between the life conditions outside and the internal capacities inside a group or person.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's very helpful in a way because my students would go home for vacation. They'd come back and they'd say, oh my God, I always fought with my uncle. And then I just realized that he's a blue level thinker. So I just talked to him about, sort of in that mode, talking about what the rules are, talking about, the rules of football or whatever. So they were so enchanted, because they had a way to understand other people that wasn't demeaning, that they were holding their values in a different way.
Survival.
Yeah. 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 So, and there's a lot of often generational misunderstanding if the next generation is really, norming to a different level.
Okay, I guess we're back at Graves identified a distinctive change.
Graves identified a distinctive change process for people and for groups transitioning between stages applicable to many kinds of life changes for individuals and groups. The process begins with the alpha stage, where a person or group feels the status quo has been in place for a long time and will continue unchanged. Over time, in the beta stage, anomalies, things that don't seem to fit, appear that disrupt the current worldview. At first, these anomalies are minimized or ignored, but eventually they accumulate, leading to groundbreaking in the worldview and struggles to maintain it. Breakdowns, I'm sorry. Leading to breakdowns in the worldview and struggles to maintain it.
When the worldview can no longer hold, the person or group falls into the gamma trough, a state of confusion, chaos, or despair. In this groundlessness, when the old worldview has completely collapsed, a fresh insight can occur, the delta surge, bringing a renewed sense of direction and energy. This propels the individual or group into a new alpha stage at the next level, where a rebuilt worldview emerges and stabilizes, integrating past experiences and transcending the old. So this is what this little diagram is about. It's from their the assessment that they do it. The spiral dynamics site.
Okay.
It's just got some indicators there. So I decided to map this onto what happens with spiritual collectives. So this is entirely my my projection with these same sort of color coordinations. So maybe we should read this.
Okay.
The first one is a beige level.
And let's see, who's up? Is that me now?
Yeah, that's you.
Okay. Spiritual collectives. The spiritual group focuses on basic survival, finding a place to meet, trying to meet basic expenses in order to survive. There is not yet any doctrine or social structure. The group recognizes or forms around a priest, guru.
And in the purple level.
I'm sorry, say again?
At the purple level.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is the group recognizes or forms around a priest, guru, or shaman with mysterious powers and organizes itself around rituals and wisdom teachings. A rich trove of lore, practices, and stories, as well as reverence for leaders and elders, connects members of the group. Do you want to get the next two, Kim?
Yeah.
Sure. In the red level, cults emerge here with their focus on a powerful leader who demands absolute loyalty and obedience. Views of the leader are absolute and often arbitrary. There are severe punishments for those who step out of line or raise questions. Fear and submission are the general rule. Members prove themselves by loyalty, heroic efforts, or ordeals and are constantly challenged. Competition for the leader's favor can be brutal.
You might recognize something of that, those qualities.
You mean politically?
Yes.
Yeah.
In the blue level, spirituality becomes religion. Institutional formation emerges here. Denominations, social structures of committees, boards, fundraising, tithing, asset management. There are policies, classes, regular religious services, missions, charity, role responsibilities, missionaries, many opportunities for serving others.
Should put there converting others.
Hmm.
Wow.
That's a big difference.
Yep.
In the orange level, religious entrepreneurship, concern with metrics such as growth of the congregation, success of fund appeals, adopting cultural trends and fads, guitar mass, karaoke and Zen temple, creative and innovative services. Church is a place for people to make connections that will advance their material success.
Probably should just finish this little part, I guess.
Okay, Melissa, you want to read?
Sure. I'm not sure what color this is. Is it green?
Yeah.
Yep.
Non-instructional collectives, study groups.
Non-institutional.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just got off work, so I'm kind of not all the time. Non-institutional collectives, study groups, meetups, practice communities without a leader or priest, democratic organizations with a flat structure where everyone's opinion is equal to everyone else's. Focus may be on the environment or social justice or spiritual study, broadly defined. Eclectic membership with diverse views. The most important value is community, and people are expected to be willing to sacrifice self-interest to that ideal. Teachings are drawn from many sources without explicit beliefs. And then, is this yellow?
Uh-huh.
Um, freely, free, freely form and disband, easily connect with others, merge with other groups, or separate as needed. There are no hard boundaries and no fixed agenda. Strong integration with technology for network effects and novel ways of providing spiritual guidance teaching, and support Facebook, Skype, Instagram, Twitter, phone apps, for example. No self promotion, no center leader, no rigid belief systems. It is almost difficult to call it spiritual as even these boundaries become permeable. There is no sense of compulsion or urgent mission as there is at Green.
So this is turquoise. A profound commitment to the well-being of life on Earth brings people at this level into communion with each other and with all beings. This creates a powerful energy field that is filled with meaning and purpose. It attracts others who radiate this level of spiritual energy. There, the wisdom and compassion are amplified many, many times over. There is, at the same time, a deep acceptance of all that is unfolding across inconceivably vast reaches of time and space.
That was it.
Well, it seems this is a hierarchy where one level is better than the last. Is that correct? I mean, I know the usefulness of it is to see where people are in order to be able to connect with them better. But I'm
I think it's useful because it suggests where you're heading. So if you recognize in yourself that your spiritual practice is really quite situated around green level values, you can see what it's going to look like when there's some transformation. So what happens with green level is its community is wonderful, except that it actually everybody doesn't belong, and actually we can't feed everybody. And this is a thought that's untenable for people at green level. So the breakdown comes when they just simply break down, like we can't do it all, we can't take care of everybody. There are people who can't be included because they hate us, and it's just a horrible thought for people at green level. Things start to break down, and then just like the whole uh, sense of a community as this sort of bounded space, like the wagons drawn in a circle and everybody is welcome to the campfire, that sort of breaks down. And then this yellow level transformation is going to happen. Well, it's helpful to know if you're in that gamma trough, let's say, you're in despair because you've lost your sense that community is everything. And if you understand that this is a shift from this green level way of holding your values to an orange level way of holding or a yellow level way of holding your values, I mean, then you have a sense of, oh, this is what I'm evolving into, rather than my world is completely apart. Does that make sense? So, and you can also help support people when you see where they are in this change state, right? If they're in the gamma trough, you've got to keep them from killing themselves. They're banging their heads against the wall. They have no idea what to do with themselves. So you want to give them some support until they can get their legs under them and have this new insight that's going to take them to another level. If they're at the sort of alpha level, everything's fine and everything's always going to be fine. You might want to point out a couple of the anomalies that make that a worldview that's about to shift, right? So part of it, for me, it's very interesting as a teacher. You're trying to think about where is this person coming from in their current organization of values, and where are they headed? And what can I do to foster that transformation or that transition?
And they might not fit because they might be in a different place.
Well, they pretty much tell you what place they're in. It's pretty obvious from the metaphors that people use. Like if someone who comes in for practice discussion says, "Well, I just want to know what the rules are here," you're off and running. You already know where you are. Somebody comes in and says, "I'm just looking for community and people who care about each other." You already know where you are.
Yes, this one woman said, "What is it that I could do that would be really bad?
Right.
What's the biggest mistake I could make?" She
How do
was
I,
a, she was a math professor.
yeah, how do I get kicked out? Yeah, everything has a correct answer, right?
Hmm.
It's a blue level way to hold values. And once you know that, then you can help them see, oh, well, the things that people get kicked out of a community for, like this, a spiritual community, are for causing damage in the community. So then then they kind of go, oh, okay, like they just want to know what's what's going to get me kicked out, what's going to get me expelled. So you start to understand how to meet people where they are then, because they're already telling you with the metaphors they use, with the images they use, with the questions they ask, exactly where they are. It's so surprising. Someone comes in and they're like, yeah, I just go around to different spiritual centers. I spent some time in an ashram, and then I was with this teacher and with this other. For a while I was studying yoga, and then I got interested in Vipassana and did some retreats. And all you're talking to a yellow level thinker, right? So you're not going to be talking to them about the rules and the regulations. You're going to be talking to them about the ways in which they can be drawn to find more depth in what they're doing. Because the problem for yellow level is they're going to look back on it and go, what does it all amount to? So usually what I tell those folks is, yeah, but if you don't plant your flag somewhere, you're never going to go deep. It's always going to be shallow. So
Like that.
So it's helpful. It's helpful for me. It helped me a lot in my work because I could see exactly where people were coming from because they tell you constantly. So what their formations are. Well, good. Let's.
We have a late entry here. Let's
Yeah,
start.
she follow me, so she's gonna pick right up, I bet.
Hi.
Hi, Star.
Hi, Scarlett.
Welcome aboard. Would you like to read?
Sure. So where are we?
Top of this left-hand page.
Where it says
Okay.
Graves defines 6 factors.
Okay. Graves defined 6 factors necessary for such transformational change: neurophysiological potential. The capacity for change must be present internally, psychologically, physically, and socially. 2. Resolution of existential problems at the current level. You don't have reserve energy for transformational change when you are just trying to survive the current conditions. That is so true. Success at the current stage of development frees energy to fuel the change. 3. Dissonance. Internal or external disruptions indicate the need for change. There is awareness of a critical shift in the environment or within the individual or group or both. This can be very distressing and disorienting. The whole worldview collapses, a time of chaos. 4. Insight, a realization of how to address new challenges. The aha moment, a new level of knowing and doing appears. 5. Removal of barriers. It's not enough to just have an insight. It must be put into action. Resources, support, and overcoming of obstacles are needed to implement insights. 6. Consolidation. Establishing stability and a sense of being at home in a new stage. The new level becomes the next status quo.
Thank you.
I came at the right time.
Right at the deep end.
Yeah. This process is not just theoretical, it is transformative, becoming part of who we are. The diagrams on the facing pages also show how Graves' model might apply to spiritual communities. The mapping suggests how evolutionary processes could work for sanghas. Although Graves' research did not directly address spiritual communities, he described his model as applying both to individuals and to groups, even whole societies. Graves' model, both evolutionary and structural, provides an excellent bridge to our third way of seeing, the perspective of architecture and design. You want to hit key takeaways, Kim?
Key takeaways on the evolutionary perspective. 1. Living systems, both individual and collectives, are responsive. They can adapt to changing conditions. Zen koans have been translated into English to connect with new audiences in the West, for example. When these adaptations become permanent, they are considered evolutionary. In turn, they become established as the new normal and are handed down in successive generations. Women Zen teachers are now routinely authorized by Dharma transmission, even by other women teachers. 3. The function of evolutionary adaptations is to enable the system, individual or collective, to survive and thrive with changes in conditions. One purpose is the transmission of the living Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, rather than the preservation of the traditional forms in which the Dharma has been transmitted in the past.
So it's our purpose. Yeah. Yeah.
Our purpose is the transmission of the living Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, rather than the preservation of the traditional forms in which the Dharma has been transmitted in the past.
Right.
Sometimes we use a small d, don't we, for living Dharma?
When we're talking about the Buddha's teachings, it's a capital D. Dharma.
But that's why I'm saying living Dharma. Oh, you still think that's the Buddha's teaching, the teachings of the Buddha. I see. Okay.
Yeah. It's
Evolutionary change has been an integral part of the of Zen's history and traditions all the way back to the Buddha's time. Adaptation and improvisation have brought us these precious teachings right down to the present day. Melissa.
Yeah, thank you. Complex systems and evolutionary perspectives are ways of seeing and describing what exists. In evolutionary systems, new structures and new levels of organization emerge as the system develops, and the need arises naturally. From a single fertilized egg, as an embryo begins developing a primitive heart and neutral tube, and as thank you. And as it continues to develop, these will evolve into a brain and its nervous system, the circulatory system, digestive system, and so on. And so on. It is the same process for any living system, a city, an economic system, a forest, or a sangha. That evolutionary development is a function of both internal and external ever-changing conditions. It is an emergent process in which the new form has very different properties, continuous with, but not the same as what it has evolved from, and also not simply a function of its separate parts.
The perspective of architecture and design is different because it is concerned with what we build, based on our intentions, principles, vision, and capabilities. Without the understanding and the wisdom that comes from the first two perspectives of systems and evolution, however, whatever you are trying to build will be on shaky ground, poorly constructed, and even dangerous to inhabit. A Sangha must begin with a strong foundation in the Dharma. From there, it must be structurally sound and suited to its purpose and uses. To survive and thrive, it needs to fit into its environment while resolving many dilemmas of its living inhabitant. And it must be beautiful.
May I ask a question?
Yes, yes, of course.
Why and it must be beautiful?
It's at the heart of really, I think, of everything that has been a kind of fundamental principle in Zen, maybe even in Buddhism altogether. But in Zen, it's probably more prominent. It needs to be beautiful. The beauty expresses the care. So that's what it's really demonstrating. So you might, in the temples, you'll see the floors are worn, everything is worn by hundreds and hundreds of years of use, but they're beautiful.
I think care is really, that you just mentioned, is really the important thing.
Yeah,
It illustrates care.
yes, that's right.
Someone paid attention.
That's right.
I have always, I think that I really like having that it must be beautiful because I think it's something that done in it's like a flower. It's beautiful
Mhm.
and it's wonderful to look at, and it's just,
That's right.
yeah.
That's right.
We just had the Zendo painted, and it makes so much difference.
Yeah,
I'm really surprised.
yeah. It's important.
And I've shared this with Kim before, but a photographer friend of mine says that beauty is God's way of remaining obvious.
Oh, that's
Oh, I
beautiful.
like that.
It's
I
wonderful.
like that. Beauty is God's way.
Okay, I
I
think
like that.
it's Starlet now.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Architecture and design. When the evolutionary development is a process that is intentionally and thoughtfully designed, I call it an emergent architecture. A highway system is a kind of architecture that must be planned as it is emerging, a sangha. Two, a sangha, too, is an emergent social structure, whether it follows the traditional Zen model in its evolution or it takes an innovative approach in developing itself as Appamada has. It's not random, nor is it a process based on whim or ego. In your own life, you create structures you inhabit through your relationships and activities, structures such as families, workplaces, homes, careers, friendships, and so on. These architectures for living are a reflection of your intentions, imagination, and effort as they meet your own existential conditions in the world. Okay, I love that paragraph.
Oh, thank you. So maybe Ed, you might want to read Christopher Alexander's piece on the facing page.
Yes. In short, no pattern is an isolated entity. Each pattern can exist in the world only to the extent that is supported by other patterns. The larger patterns in which it is embedded, the patterns of the same size that surround it, and the smaller patterns which are embedded in it. This is a fundamental view of the world. It says that when you build a thing, you cannot merely build that thing in isolation, but must also repair the world around it and within it, so that the larger world at that one place becomes more coherent and more whole, and the thing which you make takes its place in the web of nature as you make it. Now that's beautiful.
Mhm.
Christopher
Agree.
Alexander.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Okay, so that gets us to in some eras. In some eras, similarly, the followers of the Buddha built huge statues, monasteries, temples, and universities. They adorned them with banners and jewels and created stunning gardens. Our Sangha is modest, ordinary, and small, yet everything has been designed and built with care and dedication. The social structure is sound, as we'll see in the next chapter. The small scale gives it a certain intimacy and familiarity. It invites engagement with each other in an atmosphere of ease, curiosity, and shared practice. Although the design and building of Appamada's unique social architecture has been intuitive rather than formal, it is still based on certain underlying life-affirming principles. Where did those architectural principles come from? By a happy accident in a bookstore many years ago, I found myself in the architecture section where, for some reason, I picked up a book by Christopher Alexander called A Timeless Way of Building. It was a curious volume with an old-fashioned cover. I opened the first page to read this. And here you go, Kim.
I'm just wondering if this is a good place to.
Yeah, we could stop here,
Yeah.
or we could read this little part. Let's read down to
Okay.
4, down to number 4.
The timeless way. A building or a town will only be alive to the extent that it is governed by the timeless way. It is a process. It is a process which brings order out of nothing but ourselves. It cannot be attained, but it will happen of its own accord if we will only let it. The quality. To seek the timeless way, we must first know the quality without a name. There is a central quality which is the root criterion of life and spirit in a man, a town, a building, or a wilderness. This quality is objective and precise, but it cannot be named. The search which we make for this quality in our own lives is the central search of any person and the crux of any individual person's story. It is a search for those moments and situations when we are most alive. In order to define this quality in buildings and in towns, we must begin by understanding that every place is given its character by certain patterns of events that keep on happening there.
That's a good place to stop.
I'm just going to point out, I don't know how you're feeling about this, and I don't have a feeling from what we've read, but where you say the root criterion of life and spirit in a man, a town, a building, I think it would probably be, it might be better to say spirit in a person.
I would do that if it were my book, but this is a direct
Oh,
quote.
this is a quote. Never mind then. As I told you, I'm not quite all here tonight. Thank you. That's a lovely.
Nice way to dodge a bullet, Peg.
What page number is that, Ed?
This is 346.
But I will say that if this is a direct quote, it needs to have quotation marks.
We don't have a big chunk of text like that. I might end up being inset a little bit. That's the way you set off a big set of text.
You also have the other option of at the beginning of the quote, you put the open quotation marks, and then you only add quotations to each paragraph that comes after and only at the beginning. And on the very last paragraph, that's where you write the closing quotation marks. So you
Right.
have those two options.
I'm gonna do that. That's
Yeah.
not what I do.
And like you said, you can inset it a little bit more and just put his name again at the bottom
Yeah.
after 4. And just put it again. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
I would like to mention something, if that's okay.
Uh-huh.
It's referencing back to the part of beauty.
Uh-huh.
I I keep going back to when I grew up in Spain, in Andalusia, in Seville. So you have the biggest cathedral in the world built is actually in Seville. And when you go in there, you're tiny. It's a gorgeous place. But the fact is that it was built to create awe
Uh-huh.
versus creating beauty. And it's a very different feeling when you enter into a building that has been made to make you feel small.
Uh-huh. That's very cool.
It's very different than when you go into a place like you were talking about, where beauty is done to show care. So
Mhm.
when the person comes into a place like that, that beauty is welcoming.
Yes, that's
It's,
exactly right. Yeah. It's human scale.
Mm.
yes, but at the same time, you are correct when you were saying it shows care, because you paint the walls in order to take care of the building, not only to make it look beautiful, but you achieve both things.
Right.
If a place is clean, you're showing that care, but if on top of that you're showing the beauty of the world and nature and human beings, it's a completely different structure, community. It's a beautiful thing in itself.
That's what we hope for.
Okay, should I stop the share at this point?
So yes, I did inset that section, so
Oh, good.
that should be helpful.
And I think, yeah, it gives it emphasis, and I think each one of those paragraphs are things where you're going to read it and stop anyway to absorb.
It blew my mind that this was a book by an architect, that this was about architecture, because he's really writing about the Tao. So surprising.
There's another, and I can't remember his name right now, but a very famous architect, and his whole philosophy, everything he was talking about, was about the Tao. And it was a photographer who turned me on to him, and it was amazing how this had nothing to do really with 2x4s and steel beams and nails.
Yeah, he's the one who really talked about architecture as relationships. So we'll get to that. It just was so inspiring.
Mm.
So yeah, thanks so much. All of you have really helped me in a lot of different ways with this project so far. So wonderful, wonderful. Do you have anything to share? What you want to say?
Well, I went back and looked at how the transition to the spiral dynamics area, and because I felt a little uncomfortable, like, oh, was I now reading a different book? I just had a little bit of a feeling about that, and that I wanted some more integration with Appamada or an instance or an example or something.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if others of you had that feeling,
Yeah,
but
I agree. Oh,
It, yeah, it did come off like that, but it was incredibly insightful. But yeah, I think just weaving it back to some specifics, I guess, to Appamada would pin it down more tangibly.
Yeah. Well, I wondered about putting it in at all, but it's part of evolution, so it's part of the evolutionary thinking. Is how these stages unfold. So that was part of the reason for it being there. But you're right, it does need to have more integration with the Sangha.
And you can make the intuitive leap. I did in my brain, which is scary. But the holistic and integrated aspect of it, when you start saying about the process, because it's applicable to any living system, whether it's sanghas or cities or humans, that's really important to understand that, and then to see the workings of that under the covers and above the covers. It really hits home, but you do have to make that kind of intuitive leap without something else to tie it in there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's definitely something it's always surprising to me when people want more text. So thank you for authorizing that.
You're doing something right.
I was kind of wondering about something, and again, it may be just because I'm having trouble focusing, but is the desire of a system, and wherever it is on the scale, when you're creating like a sangha or something like that, is it desirable to try to have people at each of those levels all together?
I
Or
don't,
I don't quite understand.
you can't control for that.
Right.
You can do is teach spiral dynamics so that people develop an appreciation for each other.
Okay.
So that the main thing for me that's useful about it is when somebody thinks differently than you do, it doesn't just mean they're a butthead. Like
Yeah.
they may be operating with a different value structure.
Mm-hmm.
So we both think we're talking about the Sangha, right? And what's good for the Sangha. But coming from those different levels, our ideas about what will make that happen are quite different. If we don't understand that to some extent, then we're more subject to conflict, right? And like what we teach people to say is, I can see how it would look that way from your perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
That's a good phrase.
So it's not saying I agree with that perspective, but it is saying I can see from that perspective. And that we sometimes say that Zen is aperspectival. It's not stuck in any perspective. So has the capacity. It's really interesting to me when I started studying spiral dynamics, how the Buddha's teachings spoke to each one of those levels. And as culture evolved, it sees different things in the Buddha's teachings as a result of arriving at some new level of understanding. So, and yet, here it is 2,500 years later, population's at a very different place. And it's still, we're still recognizing new things, new to us in the Buddha's teachings, because we're at a different level of understanding.
And
I like that.
Yeah, I like that too. And it was very interesting for me. It was one of those little mini mind-blowing things again, where what it followed up with and what we stopped at was the thing that said, to seek the timeless way, we must first know the quality without a name. After getting that foundation of the spiral dynamics in place and seeing how that applies, putting that perspective in place, that's a game changer right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm hoping that this is hitting you this way and doesn't seem like a stupid tangent. This whole set of perspectives and this chapter, these three perspectives. If it doesn't seem like really taking the long way around.
So long as there's no test or you grade on a curve, we're okay.
Well, that's exactly right.
Well, on that note,
Mhm.
I would like to say that I don't think it's is a tangent. I think is very much in line because remember not the last meeting, the meeting before in Appamada Action. The thing is that to me, the Graves 6 factors that are necessary for transformational change, those 6 factors is what we were talking about
Uh-huh.
when we were talking about what can we do about what's happening out there. That is like a guideline on how to do it and see where are we at, so we can take steps knowing where we are in. I mean, so to me, this is very actionable and present.
Oh, that's relieving. I just imagine my reader is going, we don't have to listen to what she says.
Yeah. I see how you feel that way, but I am right.
I just had an idea that as you spoke about spiral dynamics, you spoke about its usefulness
Uh-huh.
in terms of connecting with people who are different, but you didn't write about that.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that should go in there.
I think that would be very good.
I
Because everywhere else you've been relating what you're talking about back to the group or back to how to incorporate it into things that people do
Right.
are going to be doing in the Sangha. So
Right.
yeah, I think if you could do that, that would be really good.
Funny because I've been teaching this material for so long that I assumed that was really obvious.
No, well, no. Not always.
So subtle, Melissa.
Yeah, there's a whole one of the foundations classes is on spiral dynamics in the on the website. There's some more materials about it. Yeah.
I wrote something.
Good. I'd love to hear it.
Okay. The stepping stones of DNA build me, you and living beings. The helix staircase, the blueprint of my brain, where my mind resides. My mind reaching out through my voice, my touch, my hearing you talk to me in conversation. From one mind to another, connecting, creating friendship, living in the beauty of it all.
Oh, very nice.
Lovely.
Thank you. I was really struck about the architecture and how, well, buildings. And the thing is that it applies to everything. And the example that you give there of the inception of life and how it transforms, but it's still inherently the same thing. And that is all in the genes, in the DNA. That's the blueprint. When we build something, there's always a blueprint, or at least something that we aspire to build. And the thing is that it is completely inherently in us, in all of us. And I also think that the beauty is also like that. Because a rose may not know that it's beautiful, but it is in the DNA. It doesn't have to be so beautiful. And when we look at a butterfly or just a sunset, there is an innate beauty in nature. And it's something that every time that we look at it, it makes us reflect, feel better, calm down. So, and I think that one of the most beautiful things in that we have in existence is friendship, and be able to have community and connect with one another. That human connection is something invaluable. And I think that from the readings before, you have tried to build that into the Sangha.
Mhm.
And I wanted to bring it back because to me, that's what I thought.
Very nice.
Does that get us to our time here?
Does. Thank you so much, everyone.
It does.
Thanks for
Oh,
carving
you're welcome.
time every Monday night, and I'm proceeding ahead. I've completely restructured the next part of the book, so it'll be interesting to see what you think about that. But um, yeah, I'm happy about how it's coming along. It's everything I know. That's in the book.
And you know an awful lot. It is amazing. We appreciate it.
Well, we'll see how useful it is. Let's see.
You
Yeah.
remember that book, Died for a Small Planet?
Yeah.
I,
Francis,
I wrote the author years ago when it came out. I wrote the author a question, and she said, "Just look at my book. It's everything I know."
about the dissertation, when I finished the dissertation, I thought, well, that's everything I know about everything. And so I'm never going to be able to write anything again, like it's
Then her daughters took over.
taken all this time. Yeah, her daughter took over. Can look forward.
I would just like to say that you should hear what Melissa has to say about making a peanut butter sandwich, because I think it applies.
Making a peanut butter.
I'll tell you real quick, and if we want to go, I can tell you when we come back next time. So I was a campfire leader. And one of the exercises that we did with the teenagers was we got them out and we said, okay, here's a jar of peanut butter, here's a loaf of bread. Oh, well, first, what do you think you need for a peanut butter sandwich? And so they said what they thought they needed. I said, okay, now you guys go write down how to make a peanut butter sandwich.
Mhm.
Then you're going to switch what you wrote with somebody else. And so it's an amazing exercise, because what we assume everybody knows, if they don't know, they don't know, right? So you'd have kids come up and then says, okay, take a knife and put the peanut butter on the bread. So the kids that weren't all girls, they were boys too, would stand there with their knife hitting the top of the lid, right? They couldn't get anything to do that. And so it was really interesting to see how they had to stop and really think about how to make a peanut butter sandwich and how not to make assumptions of what somebody would know, because maybe you've never made a sandwich or maybe whatever. And if you have to just follow the directions, then somebody needs to have walked through those directions before and not realized. And I think it's very much the way you write. You're very much leading us through the steps of making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and doing it very well, so that we don't miss that step. We don't, if we were going to go try it ourselves, we don't miss opening the jar.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had that as executive training in AT&T in the 80s.
Yeah.
Make a peanut butter sandwich.
The common writing
It's
exercise.
it's it's amazing. It's what it does. Yeah, it was in the 80s that I was campfire. Well, no, I take it back. It was in the 90s that I was a campfire leader. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a great teaching.
Yep.
yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.
Hey.
Bye.
Bye.
Keep working away.